I've always had stuff, and it's always been pretty stuff, you know? I've studied art history and architecture, and I like making stuff. I like any kind of car. I can appreciate a lowrider for the beauty and the paint. I like hot rods. The goofy four-wheel drive truck is fun for a different reason. Part of it was I wanted a sports car, something on the edge of a supercar, right? A Lamborghini or Ferrari were just outside my financial range, and Lotus wasn't that much on my radar because I didn't really think I could afford that type of a car. I was on a business trip to visit a vendor in northern Indiana, and I'm in Schoolcraft, and this Lotus is sitting on the side of the road with a for sale sign on it. I'm like, what in the world is this doing here, of all places, right? So on my way back home, I stopped and looked at it. It was owned by the local bank. They had got it as a bankruptcy surrender. When I realized what I could buy it for, it really became, obtainable. The wedge form, it's like you immediately know that's a sports car. The next week I had a business trip in Florida, and there's a dealer down there that had a couple, so I went and looked at those. They were a lot more money, and they weren't in that much better shape. So I came back and called to see if they still had it. They did, but they said they had somebody who was going to buy it, and they told me what the guy was going to pay for it. And I said, well, can I be second in line if he doesn't come through? And he didn't. So that's how I ended up with the Lotus Esprit. Being a Lotus, it handles really well. It's actually much more compliant than you would think. The turbo spooling up, it's old school, right? It's an old carbureted car. Compared to a new car or a newer car, right? My other cars are German, so they're tight, built like, solid. This is a fiberglass body, it creaks and groans. The frame goes up the center of the car, it's a tube frame, and stuff is bolted onto fiberglass, which is probably not a good long-term way to build a car. Even the leather in the seats, creaks against the other leather. It's not a quiet ride. You also have the engine right behind you, and you can hear the turbo spool up. It's a little deceiving when you see it in pictures. You don't get a real sense of the scale. It's super short, it's only 44 inches high. It's interesting when you drive it because you see here, you don't really see much over here. You sit so far down in it and kind of in a reclined angle. You can run through the gears and you can hear the exhaust, and it kind of burbles as you let off. It's pretty raw, but that's part of the romantic experience, right? The track days I've done with the Lotus, it's a blast. It's the most fun you can have. It's super intense, completely different than driving on the road. There's so much more in that car than there is in me and driving it. I had at one point thought about putting a turbo adjustable boost kit on it, right, and stuff. And then I did a track day, and it's like there's so much more potential there. The part that needs work is between the seat and the steering wheel. It's interesting, and these are small batch built, right? There's 343 the year this one was made. You see things like, oh, that hood has only 4 slots in it instead of the number of slots mine has in it. Oh, the valance in the front, the spoiler area, has different inlets than this one has. So there are some subtle things like that you see from car to car, even in this same series, where you see unique things. The designer did a really good job of integrating all the parts. Being a Lotus, a lot of the parts are borrowed from other car manufacturers. The gear ratios from the transaxle, which is a Citroen, are well matched to the engine, which is a Lotus engine. They built their own motors at that point in time. I've been through pretty much everything. The motor's been out of it 3 times at least. A couple of years ago I had it pulled out and all resealed. It doesn't seal very well because it's an English car, I guess. It's temperamental. I mean, stuff does just randomly stop working, but it's never really stranded me. There are things that are borderline non-obtainable these days. One of the times it was in a shop over in Detroit. They had it on the hoist for a long time and the windshield stress cracked. The windshield has to come from England, so it was expensive for them to replace it, but the other piece of that is the trim that goes around it is no longer available. Through connections, which I don't know how you would have done any of this pre-internet, I found a guy who needed trim also and was having extrusion dies built to make new aluminum anodized windshield trim. So you do run into some goofy stuff like that where it's like, it's just not a part that's available. If you look at it from a distance, it's a simple wedge, right? If you get up to it and you really start studying it, there's a lot of complexity in its form. That's part of what I've tried to capture when I've taken pictures of it, because there's some beautiful shapes, right, with the scoops and the angles, and I can't get it. But it's beautiful to look at. I love to own something that you walk away and you turn around and look at it. It's like why you would have a beautiful painting at your home or a beautiful sculpture, but I get to use it. I used to know a guy who had hot rods and he would remodel them every couple of years. And I asked him about it once and he said, well, I want to drive them, I want to use them, I don't want a mantelpiece. And I guess that's why I like that car too. It's got some chips in it, right? It's got some scrapes and it makes me irritated every time that happens, but I want to be able to use it. I'm always shocked by super low mileage cars. This car has 80,000 miles on it, which is probably one of the highest mileage G series Esprits out. But I love it, you know. The experience of owning it all the way around, it's like by the end of summer, I'm usually kind of ready to put it away. But by the spring, it's like I can't wait to get it out.
Put it in sport mode!